23-month-old boy has an incurable degenerative neurological condition. British doctors say further treatment is futile and he should be allowed to die. But his parents have fought for months to take him to a hospital in Italy where he would be kept on life support. The hospital withdrew Alfie's life support Monday after a series of courts sided with the doctors and blocked further medical treatment. In London, Benjamin Hall, Fox News.
U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions drops the hammer on an international drug ring that he says has profited on the deaths of Americans. Jeff Manasso reports.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions, speaking in Fargo, North Dakota, unseals 2 indictments charging 10 defendants, including Chinese nationals, accused of allegedly trafficking large amounts of fentanyl into the U.S. and Canada.
Ending the drug crisis in America is a top priority for President Trump and this Department of Justice. 5
of the Chinese nationals indicted are fugitives. 3 co-conspirators were arrested in 3 different states. The American drug overdose crisis took 64,000 lives in 2016 alone. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
Graduate students at Columbia University remain on strike amid demands for better pay, benefits, and working conditions, and even the right to unionize. A spokesman for the private university says Columbia does support unions, but believes student teaching and research assistants pursuing an education are not employees under the law. Daniel DeSalvo, a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute and an associate professor of political science at City College of New York, agrees with the university.
I think that this would be, in the long run, detrimental to graduate education in the United States. The difficult thing is that universities don't operate like many other private businesses or business firms. They have peculiarities that make them a kind of guild system where students are really coming to get an education and learn, and much of the work that they're performing is part of that educational process, and therefore trying to standardize things through the adversarial relationship of collective bargaining would probably be in the long run detrimental.
Football players at Northwestern University were unsuccessful in recent years to unionize. Young conservatives are battling Berkeley in federal court. Chris Woodward has more.
A federal judge in San Francisco ruled to allow Young America's Foundation's First Amendment lawsuit against Berkeley to move forward, giving students their day in court to hold Berkeley accountable for violating their rights and suppressing conservative speech. YAF spokesman Spencer Brown.
This decision has actually been a long time coming. It's actually been about a year and a week since we filed this complaint in federal court there in San Francisco. And it's based on 2 key policies that the University of California at Berkeley has used in order to shut down conservative speakers. So the 2 policies are known as the high-profile speaker policy, which was unwritten and unpublished, so how would students know that they were being subjected to that? And then the second sort of replacement policy for that one, when we called the first one out, is known as their major event policy. And the main flaw with both of those is they give the administrators unfettered discretion in determining who is allowed to speak at what times and where on campus. And so what we saw is this pattern from Berkeley as we worked with the students there to bring conservatives in. Our speakers were consistently subjected to these restrictions and not allowed to speak.
AFN saw a comment from Berkeley and was told it disputes claims from Young America's Foundation. Nonetheless, Spencer Brown says his organization has evidence of a secret and unpublished policy. I'm Chris Woodward.
And the U.S. economy slowed to a moderate 2.3% annual growth rate in the first quarter as consumer spending turned in the weakest performance in nearly 5 years. For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
Is God calling you to pursue theological graduate education? What's keeping you from taking the first step? Is it time? What if you could choose from flexible class options? Is it money? What if competitively priced seminary offered academic scholarships? Do you think you're alone? What if your classmates were just like you, balancing careers and families with seminary? Hello, I'm Dr. John Nyhoff, president of Wesley Biblical Seminary in Jackson, Mississippi. Take the first step. Visit wbs.edu.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Are you surprised by how quickly this moment has arrived? I mean, let's face it, just 4 months ago, Kim Jong-un was talking about pressing nuclear buttons from his desk, and President Trump was responding in kind.
I feel like somebody stepped on the accelerator at the beginning of the year, and it's been nonstop since then.
How do you account for it?
Clearly, credit goes to President Trump. He's been determined to come to grips with this from day one.
Wow. Welcome to Stacey on the Right. Happy Friday to you. We are going to be taking calls all this hour from the listeners. We're so grateful to have you guys here with us on a sunny Friday. At least it's sunny here in the Midwest. We've got good weather and good talk radio for you this afternoon here on Urban Family Talk, urbanfamilytalk.com, and American Family Radio. So let's first get into who's on the show today. We have Sara Gonzales from The Blaze. She's done a ton of different things for them over there. She's going to join us in hour 2 and talk about news of the day. And then we have this story about a little boy named Alfie who's terminally ill and has been slotted for death by his hospital. Not happening here in the U.S., although it has happened here in the U.S. It's much more prevalent under the national healthcare system of Great Britain. And so while single payer is always touted as this thing we Americans are too dumb to opt into, there are a number of reasons why it's just a terrible idea. And so we're going to be talking about that. Also, an LAPD officer who got arrested smuggling illegal aliens into California. Pretty interesting. And then we also have, of course, Ted Cruz did an interview, and we're continually trying to reach out to him and get him on the program. But until we can, we have some audio of him talking about breaking up Facebook as a monopoly. And I've seen a lot of reactions online from people who are admittedly on the right. They're conservatives, and they say that that means the government's too big. But the government has done that before with Southwestern Bell and with other companies that have been monopolies in their industry. So the question is it that we're going to have an argument about conservatism, or are we going to make Facebook follow the rules? Now, I'm not interested in whether or not Facebook is actually, their employees are conservatives or Republicans, or if they're political at all. It's the treatment of individuals that have an opposing ideology to those who work there, or the company's mantra. And that is what Ted Cruz is speaking to. So I want to talk to you, just give you the information. You can go to urbanfamilytalk.com and register for our conference. We're going to have amazing speakers there. The conference is from August 17th through 18th. It's in Tupelo, Mississippi. Your kids can come, so ages 4 to 12, there's a conference within a conference for them. The price beginning May 1st is $35 a person to register. Kids get in for free, and the ministry booth is $50. So if you have a ministry or a business that dovetails in with a conference about marriage and family, you can rent a booth space for $50 and have your products there, your books or what have you, or your space, so that you can tell people about what your ministry entails. So we're really excited about partnering with people who want to be a part of the conference, but we're most excited about individuals who are going to register and join us in Tupelo. So please do go to urbanfamilytalk.com and register for that. I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of listeners there and having a really good time. So we just heard this audio coming in of South Korea's foreign minister, Kang Kyung-hwa. And she was pretty clear about the fact that what has brought us to this moment where the president of, you can call him the president, but the leader of North Korea crossed over the line in the demilitarized zone that separates North Korea from South Korea, and has since given a speech stating that he wants to unify with his people, that South Koreans and North Koreans are the same people, and that they're related, and that they need to be together, and then they need unity. I mean, it's just an outstanding development. And as South Korea's foreign minister just stated, we have to give kudos to President Trump for bringing it about. So back when he was, Kim Jong-un was sending out the nasty tweets and missives through the media, and Donald Trump was responding in kind, everyone was like, he's going to send us to World War III. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. Turns out he wasn't going to do any of those things. So I'm really happy with it. I think, obviously you have to see how it cracks out, what develops out of this arrangement. But the idea that they're now going to be able to travel back and forth, hopefully, and that families that have been literally cut in two by this wall, with some family members on one side and other family members on the other side between the two countries of North and South Korea, that those families will be able to reunite. I mean, that's a good story going into the weekend. It's good information for us. And I'm excited about it. So let's talk about this LAPD officer. So this is out of San Diego. CBS Los Angeles is doing the reporting. Los Angeles police officer, and his name is Mambasi Kawabalo Patara. So we'll call him Mr. Patara. Mr. Patara has been charged with violating immigration laws, and this is according to a federal complaint that was filed on Wednesday. Early Tuesday morning, at the checkpoint in Pine Valley, located about 12 miles north of the U.S.-Mexico border, U.S. Border Patrol detained him. He drove up to the checkpoint with 2 male passengers in a 2006 Toyota Corolla. And while they were conducting the interview to allow them access into the country, the officer, Mr. Patara, showed ICE agents his LAPD badge, actually U.S. Border Patrol agents. He said, "I'm off duty." They patted him down and found that he had his service-issued gun in his waistband. So I don't know what the rules are on that. Like if you're a police officer, if you're allowed to carry your service-issue firearm. I think what you have to do is when you're off duty, you carry your own private firearm and you only use the service-issued firearm when you're on duty. I can always double check on that, but I think that's the way it works. My dad's in law enforcement. Most police officers own a private firearm or a few. So he's interviewing with them. He's telling them that he's off duty. And then they pat him down. They find the gun. And then he tells them, hey, my passengers, they're U.S. citizens too. The men, who are identified as Herman Lopez and his nephew, German Ramirez Gonzalez, eventually admitted, we're here illegally. One of the men said they'd known Qualabalo Pataro. They'd known Mr. Pataro for years, and they'd worked for him in his Fontana home, Fontana, California. So one of the men added that they decided to go to a casino, the Casino Alpine in southern San Diego County, and then they were going to head to another one in Campo and ended up at the border checkpoint near Pine Valley. So at that point, because a couple of them are now admitting that they're not in the country legally, or they're not coming into the country legally, and you've got this off-duty police officer, but he's carrying a service revolver, they decided to transport them to Campo Border Patrol Station, where they then opted to arrest them. So this is about 1:30 a.m. So the reporters, of course, traveled to his home in Fontana, and the neighbors were shocked. And one of the neighbors said, I heard what happened. They've always just been a really nice family ever since my husband and I have lived here. There's always multiple sides to every story, so I think that's important for everyone to keep in mind before jumping to conclusions. Okay. And then another neighbor said, I just don't believe he's doing that. LAPD, his employer, has now since confirmed to CBS 2 that Patara has been placed on paid administrative leave. If he's convicted, he faces up to 5 years in prison for bringing people across the border to work at his house. What is going on in America? All right. So call lines are open. It's Friday. Love to chat with you. 866-963-2037. I'm sorry. Why does he have to have people from across the border who are here illegally come over and do the work for him? Why not just hire somebody who's already here? I guess I just don't get it. Maybe it's just not like, that's not my thing. I understand about wanting people to work for an affordable amount of money. And I understand about there being a shortage of contractors. I get all of that. I don't get this. So anyway, there's a bigger kind of I don't know. So do you think that if he knew he was going to get arrested, he would have done that? As an LAPD officer, shouldn't he have had some kind of inkling that this was a possibility? He could be detained at the border with these two guys. And if he was, that they would eventually find out they were here illegally and that it might get him into trouble? Or did he just not care about that? It just makes you wonder what he was thinking when he decided, hey, I'm going to bring you guys in and let you work for me. So anyway, there's been a big drawdown over at Red State. So you guys know we often have guests from Red State on the program. We've had Caleb Howe, Kira Davis, a number of people who write for Red State have been on the program. And today it was announced, actually, it was a story by Brian Stelter on CNN. I saw it earlier than that, got a little bit of notification privately that they froze the site and let go a bunch of people. And so they're basically drawing down their staff over there. I don't know everyone who's been released. Just a few of the names came to mind, but Eric Erickson has been tweeting about it today. And there's kind of this big story about, what's going on really in media. And what's going on is a number of sites have put their information, their news and articles behind paywalls because they can no longer sustain the staffing levels that they have without the print side. And if it's an organization that's new media, meaning it never had a print side, then there's investors behind it, and they're, it's not a bottomless pit of money. So they have to be able to monetize the sites. And without the traffic from Facebook, people pouring in from Facebook to read the articles and click on the ads and hopefully buy stuff, the model is becoming unsustainable. So I just wanted to, for the record, say on the air that it's a terrible development. And I'm really sad to see this happen to so many great writers, really some of the best writers over at Red State. Not everyone's been let go, but it's a tough day for them over there. And Eric Erickson is actually doing some fundraising on it. If you go to theresurgent.com, you can, if you feel so led, donate to help him bring on some of the staffers from Red State. He's offering, everyone can write at The Resurgent, but he has some stipends available for some of the writers. And so some of the better, more well-known writers perhaps could continue their livelihood. Remember, a lot of these people who write for Red State, they use that money to make, to pay bills. So there's that. So I want to kind of go to the CNN appearance last night, and I'll have a copy of that up on, pardon me, I'll have a copy of the appearance up on StaceyOnTheRight.com. I just had a video sent over to me, so I have a copy of it. And I was on CNN last night. Now, you guys know I haven't been on in a while. Some of it was scheduling, like they asked me to come on a Sunday when my husband and I were on our way to spring break with the kids, and so I couldn't do it. And before that, the other topics that were offered to me were the kind of topics where basically it's a free-for-all, it's a brawl, and I didn't want to do it. I've had some pretty rough visits over at CNN in the past. And so it's been like not one of my priorities to go on frequently. But last night or actually yesterday afternoon, when they reached out and said they were looking for me to come on specifically to talk about the Kanye West tweets and all of that, I felt like it was a great opportunity for me to get on and also to at least mention to CNN's audience that we have the blueprint, A Better Deal for Black America, coming from Project 21 and National Center, that's going to be rolled out, and that we stopped off at the White House to present it there first. And so I was able to squeeze that into my hit there last night. But suffice it to say, they said things about President Trump that I disagree with vehemently, but I was there on behalf of Project 21. And in that capacity, I don't do any like voter advocacy. And so I can defend the president, but I wasn't there for that last night. And people know where I stand, that I voted for President Trump and that I support his policies. And so I chose not to make that the cornerstone of what I was doing there. In fact, I really thought if it was brought up properly, which I feel like I did, that we could have a discussion about how regular people, of which everyone on that panel, even Don Lemon is a regular person who has to shower and eat and, buy groceries and stuff like that. We're all people, and how we could advance the discourse between people in a more positive light based on the tweet that Kanye West sent out. In other words, we're there to talk about Kanye's tweet. Why not talk about what he tweeted about, which was, he said, you don't have to oppose Donald Trump. You don't have to support him, but everyone's entitled to their opinion. And can't we all talk about that? It didn't go over that well, but I still made it. I still made the point. And I'm grateful for the opportunity always to go on to media, especially national media like CNN. And so if you catch it, please feel free to comment at StaceyOnTheRight.com and let me know what you thought, whether it's good or bad. I don't mind. And we'll be back with more. You guys can call in 866-963-2037. We'll be back with more Stacey on the Right after this.
Isn't that a beautiful sound? The sonogram holds the sound of a baby's heartbeat. Hi, I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. we are partnering with the Ministry of Preborn to help save babies' lives. Preborn partners with pregnancy centers throughout America in helping abortion-minded women choose life through ultrasound. By letting a mother hear her baby's heartbeat and see her baby in her womb, she will choose life 80% of the time. Ultrasound is a game changer. For $140, you can provide 5 ultrasounds. All gifts are tax deductible, and 100% of your gift goes to saving babies. You can save a baby's life right here in America by donating to Preborn. To donate, dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Or donate securely at preborn.com. Your love can save a life.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with The Legacy Moment. I have a friend who was once a well-known pastor. Some years ago, he committed the sin of adultery. He had to leave a thriving ministry in shame and embarrassment. Well, I'm glad to report today he's repented, and God has restored him. In fact, if you knew him today, you'd find a sweet, humble man of God, and he'd tell you quickly what keeps him close to the heart of God is the memory of his failure and the depth of God's forgiveness. It's sad but true. Some of us are not enjoying intimacy with God simply because we think we're too deserving. I read the Bible every day. There's no horrendous sin in my life, and because I'm doing the right stuff, God needs to be close to me. We don't articulate it that way, but that's our legalistic attitude. We don't see ourselves the way God sees us. If we did, we'd realize how messed up we are. No, God's heart is especially tender toward the broken and contrite. Listen to these sweet words in verse 18 of Psalm 34. The Lord is near the brokenhearted. He saves those who are crushed in spirit. It is when we acknowledge our pain that God rushes in. He's near those who acknowledge the pain of what they've done. It's also when we acknowledge the pain of what our sin caused that he delivers us. Notice what he says in the latter part of the verse, and saves those who are crushed in spirit. It's like, oh man, I did that? How could I have done that? Well, here's what I want you to remember today. If you want an intimate relationship with God, you must run from pride, acknowledge your neediness, and turn to the one who was crushed for you. When you look up, you'll find God standing right next to you.
More information about the ministry of Crawford Loritz can be found online at livingalegacy.org.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
Senator, in the hearings that happened on Capitol Hill with Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook, your questioning was a shining moment in what I think for conservatives was an otherwise disappointing display, because no one really held Zuckerberg's feet to the fire the way you did on the question of censorship of conservatives. Could you tell us what you think the solution is to this problem? Because people are going online, they're finding out they can't share articles, or they're not getting the same kind of articles they used to get. What's the solution to this?
Well, I think, number one, the growing power of tech to censor speech is a profound threat. We're seeing now some 2/3 of Americans are getting their news through social media, and these tech companies are hard left. They are partisan Democrats, and what we're seeing is they're amplifying the views they agree with, those of liberal Democrats, and they are suppressing the views of conservatives. They are blocking conservatives, and you know it's the scope of the power is truly unprecedented. You know, you think back to the heights of yellow journalism when publisher William Randolph Hearst controlled much of media and, in fact, got America into the Spanish-American War. Well, these tech companies have power William Randolph Hearst could never have imagined. The ability, if there's a view they dislike, simply to silence it, so that if you put a post out there, you send a tweet out there, it simply goes into the void, into oblivion, and no one sees it. Likewise, they have the ability, if there are views they want to promote, to just have everything on your feed be the views they want to promote. That is invidious, it is invisible, and it is profoundly dangerous.
And so that's Senator Ted Cruz, and he's on the Breitbart podcast, their evening show, talking about this subject. And I had to point out that this is not about, because I've had plenty of people say to me, well, you know what, if you don't like the way Facebook treats conservatives, just get off. Or, you know, if you don't appreciate the way that Twitter behaves, then just delete your account and go somewhere else. And there is another app called Vero, Vero, that I've been playing around with a little bit, and it's beautifully done, and it works on your smartphone, and you can share, but the interface is nothing like Facebook. It feels like Instagram scaled up, like upscale Instagram. And we all know Instagram already has a look that is completely different from Facebook, and it's already kind of, it's clean, it's pretty, it's very visual. But this particular one it's even better than that. Like it's hard to describe. And so it's called Vero, Vero. It's free. If you want to try it out, you can. It lets you share. It lets you choose what audience you want to share with. They don't do any data scraping, and they don't have any developers who are working with it who need data or anything like that. So there's none of that stuff. It's very simply done, but it's good looking. And if its tagline is it's sharing online how you share in real life. So none of us are 100% politics all the time. In fact, I find it interesting that when I meet people out, they instantly only want to talk politics. I'm like, I've already talked politics for 2 hours or 3 hours, or like yesterday, I was on NRA TV in the morning, and then I had an event that I attended. It wasn't political per se, but it was for a specific issue. I spoke there, came back here and did this show for 2 hours, did another radio interview, and then I was on CNN last night. So I spent hours talking politics. So when I see people on the weekend, it's not that politics is off limits for me, but there's so many other things that I do that interests that I have that I can talk about. And I think people tend to, you know how little kids will say, I remember the first time our kids ever said it. We were at the store, the grocery store, and they saw their teacher there. And our 5-year-old turned and looked at me and she said, "What is she doing here?" And I said, "Probably buying food." And she said, "To take back to school?" And I said, "Why would she take her food back to school?" And she said, "Because that's where she lives." I said, "No, she doesn't live there. She lives in her own place." And they were she turned to her sibling, who is a year behind her, and said, "She doesn't live in the classroom." And he just looked really surprised. And then they both looked back at me like, that can't be true. So I think as adults, we kind of, wherever we find a person, we think that's what they do all the time. And, it's kind of true that I do this all the time, but I'm not only this. So it's just, it's weird. So anyway, you've got this site, Vero, where you can go on there and have an experience that's much more like yourself. So you share a lot of the things that people use Facebook for, but you can also share articles and things like that. I don't know if it's going to catch on. They say that if something new comes out and it doesn't catch on right away, that it's never going to catch on. I'm not sure if that's true, but it's definitely an option. And there are other ones that you can look at. There are other options out there. But when Ted Cruz talks about Facebook not being a neutral public speaker, he's talking about the law and how the law applies to corporate giants like Facebook. And so a lot of people I know there are different views out there, but in my opinion, he's got this right because Facebook currently enjoys protection from lawsuits of what's posted on their site because it is just a platform provided by them so other people can post. So the onus is on the ones who post it, not on Facebook. But if Facebook utilizes algorithms to determine what can be seen by the people who are posting and reading there, then it is no longer a neutral participant and a platform. Now it's actually an aggregator that chooses what news flies through and what doesn't. And if you have a page, you're so intimately aware of this. This is where I am right now, where they only show my live stream, what you're watching right now. Thank you so much for being here. Hey to everybody on Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope. Hey, Periscope people, please share the show, retweet it, and hit the hearts because that actually matters over at Periscope. I think it's funny because it took years to get I have a small following on Facebook compared to other outlets. Like, I'm in the thick of it for radio hosts, but for a lot of outlets, there's so many more followers they've been able to get, which is why I thought I was being throttled on Facebook. I don't know if that's true. There's no way to find out for sure. But there's so many people who say to me, I would love to see your stuff all the time, but it only shows you, I only see you once every couple of months. And I know this is true because look at the number of people who can see what I'm doing. If you look down there and see the comments or the number of likes or what have you, and then compare that to the number of people who like the page. Not all of those people have left Facebook or are no longer on there. We know that because they're still counted as a like. If you leave Facebook, all the pages you like lose a person. So it's not fair. So you might say, well, it's a private company. It doesn't have to be fair. Well, it does if it wants to continue to enjoy protection against lawsuits. It does have to be fair. Because if it's a platform and anyone can get on it, then that means anyone can show their stuff on the platform. And if only certain people can, then it's not a platform anymore. And that means the protections have to go away. Now, Ted Cruz goes on to talk about the antitrust laws being used to break up the massive power of tech lords who are currently subverting our democratic processes. It's number 6.
Now, your question is a hard one and a good one. What remedies are there? And I would say there are principally 2. Number 1, the question I asked Mark Zuckerberg, the opening question was, does Facebook consider itself a neutral public forum? And he danced around and refused to answer that. The reason that question matters so much is under current law, Facebook and other tech companies have an immunity from liability. So if someone posts something on their site, they can't be sued for it. And it's under what's called the Communications Decency Act, Section 230. The entire reason Congress enacted Section 230 was under the assumption these tech sites would be neutral public forums. They would allow people to be speaking. And so the reasoning was, well, we'll protect you from being sued because it's not you speaking, it's somebody else. Well, if Facebook and the other tech companies are going to choose instead to be partisan political speakers, they've got a right to do that. They've got a First Amendment right to become and to be partisan political speakers. But there's no reason on earth they should get a special immunity from liability from Congress. Breitbart, if y'all go on the radio and say something that's slanderous, you can be sued. If the New York Times prints something that is libel, they can be sued. So why on earth should Facebook get a special immunity from liability that nobody else does? I think that's one remedy. And then a second remedy is considering using the antitrust laws.
So this is, and there was more to it, but I didn't want to have, just all audio of that interview. The gist of what he's sharing is that there are remedies and that Congress should utilize those remedies because in the big scheme of things, no one deserves protection if they aren't abiding by the rules that provide the protection. I tend to agree, and it's not because I'm a conservative and I want to see Facebook punished. Contrary, I wish they would go back to the way they were. Remember when Facebook was the kind of place where anyone could post anything and any video could go viral? Remember when it wouldn't be odd for, a 60-second video of you doing something, talking about anything really, 100,000 people could see it. Like you literally could just go on and share something and a bunch of people could see it and then you could never post a video again. It was really, you could find anything you wanted and your news feed had a little thing at the top. It was either chronological order or most relevant. And if you click chronological order, it didn't automatically switch it back. And you saw all of, like if you were interested in news, the more you clicked on news, the more news it showed. And you could still see your friends' posts. They were interspersed. There were very few ads. And it was just like, it was a platform. I wish they'd go back to that. And I know obviously they have to make money, but is money really the issue here? If you look at the size of Facebook and the fact that they have $250 billion in reserves offshore, reserves. This is money that they do not use to operate their business. Now, any business that's successful, no matter how many reserves they have, they're always looking for ways to capitalize on their market share and availability to increase their market share and to offer new and innovative products that will keep them at the top of the market. But this isn't even a market anymore. It's Facebook and there's nothing else. They own everything else that mattered to anyone. And Twitter, they've hobbled Twitter to the point where it's still viable. It still works now, but the trajectory it was on has been completely obliterated. And that was done by Facebook. So there's only Facebook, Google, and Amazon. And so for people who say, well, something else will pop up, something else, will it? If things continue on in the way that they have, anything that creates a real and present danger to Facebook will be bought by Facebook and will be Facebook, because that's what Instagram now is. That's what WhatsApp is. So is this the way we want things to be? I tend to think not, but I don't see a lot of people actually jumping off of Facebook. And I'm not encouraging you to jump off of it. I'm saying if people were really that upset about what we've learned, they would. So I haven't jumped off of it. So I'm right there in the thick of that. So I can't judge anybody for not jumping off because I haven't. So it's just, to me, it's a fascinating look at what's going on. And I don't think Ted Cruz is going to let this go, which to me, that's awesome. At least he's going to explore it fully. And there's a chance that something might actually be done about it. So, there it is. Now, okay. I'm on Facebook and people are saying that it's dropping in and out. I don't see any drops on my interface here, but hopefully you guys are able to get information. So people are actually weighing in that first of all, the big deal with Joy Reid. Okay, so I'm going to cover that right now, just 1 second. Kim, I'm glad to see you back on here. She says she hasn't seen me in months. This is what I'm talking about. If she didn't want to see me anymore, she could hit the unlike button. Why does Facebook decide that she can't see me anymore? That's precisely the problem. So Joy Reid. So you guys may or may not have heard about Joy Reid and the whole thing that's going on with her website. So, she's a hardcore liberal and she's been given awards by liberal organizations for her liberal advocacy on behalf of homosexuals, same-sex marriage, et cetera, et cetera. And she's known to be a proponent of kind of the open borders, let every refugee in, that whole bit. So Joy actually had blog posts on her blog from quite a bit ago, which is, it's kind of funny to me that people are looking into this and making a big deal about it. Cause I don't care, but it's huge news. It's over at the Washington Free Beacon and others are talking about it. And she's actually had to, I don't know if it's a new attorney or it's her same attorney she's always had. He's now giving her billable hours working on this for her to try to control the damage. So she praised an Islamophobic blog post about Muslims with AK-47s and mud huts. So this is back in 2006. So admittedly, a long time ago, but not longer than the Trump access tapes 11 years ago. So I guess, what's good for the goose is good for the gander for the people who are attacking her on this. She said Islam in its current form back then is largely incompatible with Western democracy. Now, a lot of people feel that, and I don't even think that's Islamophobic. That's just an acknowledgement that the proper practice of Islam does not comport with the free ideals of the West. Women driving, getting educations, marrying whoever they want, wearing whatever they want, having their heads uncovered, working all day, defying their husbands by doing whatever they want to do. These things are Western ideals that Muslims don't practice if they're practicing true Islam. So this was back in December. Well, she apologized for old homophobic blog posts in December of 2017. So this has been going on for a few months. They've been combing through this blog of hers called The Reid Report. Now, she took her blog down, but they've been going to Internet Archive's Wayback Machine and looking at her blog there. So then she actually sent over a request to exclude her blog from the Wayback Machine, but a mirror of the Wayback Machine operated by the Library of Congress is unaffected. So the blog is still up. That's why they say the internet's forever. So several of her posts are still available and for looking at on that site. And this particular post that's got everybody all enraged is from February of 2006, where you've got the violent protests over the Danish paper publishing those Muhammad cartoons. And she called it Clash of Civilizations Take 15,342 and criticized George Bush for trying to bring democracy to the Muslim world, and then linked to the Gateway Pundit, which Washington Free Beacon calls a conspiracy and birther site. Wow. So I learned a lot, reading that one yesterday when I tweeted it out. Anyway, looks like she's getting a little bit dose of her own medicine here. All right. When we get back, we will have some talk about what's going on in Syria with our forces putting down those mercenaries who were from Russia and how Russians have responded to that interdiction. Anyway, we'll be back with more right after this.
St. John 1:1 says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Remember in the Word when Jesus was responding to Satan's antics? When Satan was trying to tempt Jesus with food, Jesus responded with himself. He responded with the Word. There are no new tricks in Satan's book. At the end of the day, his job is to create fear and doubt, and steal, kill, and destroy. So if Jesus, who is fully God, responded to Satan with the Word, why do we think that we can get along without the Word? The Bible says, "Study to show thyself approved." Equip yourself with the Word daily and watch your response to Satan's foolishness change. One of my coworkers, Pastor Joseph Parker, teaches that it's good to read at least 3 chapters a day. Sounds good to me. Today is a good day to start. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Tony Johnson. Connect with us at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Family is an institution set forth by God, one man and one woman for life, with the outflow being children produced by that union. It's obvious to all that there is an attack on the family in our country, and especially on fathers. Whether it's the cycle of sin that persists in our families or the pressure from our government to exclude men from being intimately involved, the strategic battle is on for the souls of men. Join us in the battle to strengthen fatherhood. urbanfamilytalk.com.
God allows crises in our lives to reveal God in a way you have never seen him before.
Dr. Tony Evans talks about the upside to down times.
When God shakes things up, it's because he's doing something new.
A look at what it takes to find the deliverance you need to make a spiritual comeback. This week on The Alternative with Dr. Tony Evans.
The influence of media is so very powerful over a person.
American Family Association and the family of Anna Bright want to warn you about the Netflix program 13 Reasons Why.
I really feel in my heart with all my soul that that show contributed to her passing.
After binge-watching Season 1 of 13 Reasons Why, 14-year-old Anna Bright committed suicide in the same manner depicted on the show.
To portray suicide, first of all, as an option is not a good thing. To portray it graphically, it leaves you vulnerable to the enemy's attack, which I think it definitely did for our daughter.
She took a permanent solution to a temporary situation.
Help protect our teens by signing the AFA petition urging Netflix to pull Season 1 and cancel the upcoming Season 2 of 13 Reasons Why. You can see Anna's story and sign the petition at afa.net. That's afa.net.
This is Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Are the Russians forces actively harassing American forces in Syria? And what do you believe is an appropriate response if you agree that they are?
I cannot target the responsibility to the Russians right now. As you know, it's a crowded battlefield, and it's also got Iranians there, and of course the regime forces as well. But you notice as we go forward with we've so far sanctioned 189 individuals in Russia, and we're looking at those who have, we've also, as you know, thrown 6 of their diplomats out, and economic sanctions are going to be obviously looked at for future violations as well. So we have an asymmetric way, an indirect way of going back after them and making them pay.
Wow. So that was General Mattis, and he's appearing before the Senate Armed Services Committee, and they're asking him questions about the operations that are going on in Syria, getting an update from him. And he is explaining how they're going about interacting on the ground, how the troops are able to operate when there are so many other factions there. So the Russians have a huge presence there. And the question was, how are you guys able to maneuver? How do you do that? And are you keeping in contact with the Russians? And of course they are. He goes on to explain how they use the Euphrates River as a demarcation point for their movements. And he then talks about what happened with the Russian mercenaries, of which there were a few hundred. And they were there, and he first had to find out if they were there under the auspices of the Russian government, the Russian Federation, or if they were there on their own. And then they had to deal with them accordingly because they were clashing. And so he goes on and explains that in number 4.
Right now in Syria, we have an odd and somewhat open and never interrupted deconfliction communication line that has worked pretty well to make certain we don't run afoul of one another's forces or one another's operations. They are not coordinated. They're deconflicted in either time or space, mostly in space. The river, for example, the Euphrates, divides our activities in some cases.
Did you use that deconflicted line in communication with the Russians when it was reported in February that there were large numbers of Russian irregular forces that had attacked U.S. forces?
It was used, Senator. The Russian High Command in Syria assured us it was not their people. And my direction to the chairman was for the force then was to be annihilated. And
Thank
it
you,
was.
Sir.
So he goes on to describe how, after communicating with the Russians, he made the decision to annihilate those forces, and they were annihilated. And so this kind of highlights something that I think a lot of us take for granted about our military forces. And so these people who were there engaging, it's not like they were unarmed or they were not trained or unable to create a problem, but it's kind of matter of fact the way Mattis just shared what the end result was. They reached out, so the American forces reached out to the Russian High Command in Syria. And the Russian High Command said, yeah, those are not our people. And when they were assured that they weren't Russian mercenaries, then Mattis simply directed the chairman he uses the word annihilate. He didn't say they were eliminated. He said they were annihilated, destroyed utterly, obliterated. A simple bomb of this type could annihilate them all, is the sample passage that they give. So that means annihilation indicates that it was defeating utterly an opponent with virtually no losses to your own side. This is war we're talking about here. So the questions were, is the Russian Federation harassing U.S. forces in Syria? He stopped short of blaming them specifically for specific battlefield actions, but he did say, I cannot target the responsibility to the Russians right now. It's a crowded battlefield. It's also got Iranians there, regime forces as well. But he gave the order to kill a few hundred Russians who were there operating as mercenaries, to simply wipe them away. And that's what happened. It's kind of a sobering thought. And my hope is that we're going to see some kind of resolution in Syria. Wouldn't it be great if we, after seeing North Korea and South Korea declare the end to their war, that they would have some kind of meaningful interactions post-declaration, and that then we would be able to focus our energies on Syria and getting out of there and leaving it better than we found it, which, again, we've had so many people on, Professor Grossman and others, David Raboy. They've all been on the program and said that there's such a mess in the Middle East that there is no leaving it, and there's no leaving it better than we found it. But I just still hold out hope that we could do something, that we could find something about it that we could do to not be spending billions of dollars over there on a yearly basis and losing people and having Americans going over there and losing their limbs, et cetera, et cetera. I just really, that's my hope. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting exchange and one that you're not going to see on the news. And it's just sad, but that's what happened, and so the Americans made a decision, and that's what we did. So I want to pivot over to the Department of Justice and this campus free speech case, which, again, if you're a parent who has kids in college, or your kids are going to be in college in a few years or next year, these stories are beginning to take on a distinctly un-American tone. Some people are allowed free speech, others are shut down, and some of them are expelled and gotten rid of. That's not American, and that's not the First Amendment. Although I know the First Amendment only applies to the government shutting you down. Colleges that receive government aid, is that a gray area? I don't know. So the Department of Justice announced on Friday that they have a victory on campus free speech litigation. And this story is actually, the quotes from Devin O'Malley. He's a spokesman for the Justice Department. And they talk about Young America's Foundation victory this week in their free speech case against UC Berkeley. Now, this is kind of a big deal. Young America's Foundation actually sends speakers out to campuses to speak to interested college students. So it's never mandatory, and it's never anything that's paid for by the university. It's an event that students at the university can put on, and Young America's Foundation brings a speaker out. So it's Young America's Foundation v. Napolitano, which was brought by the Berkeley chapter of YAF against former Attorney General and now president of the University of California system, Janet Napolitano. She sound familiar? She used to be, I believe, the Attorney General. Yeah. So they allege that two of the campus's free speech policies that were instituted in the wake of campus protests of high-profile conservative speakers have granted administrators unfettered discretion in determining who can come. The Department of Justice joined the litigation with YAF with a statement of interest that they sent in January, and they argued that the case should be allowed to proceed on First Amendment grounds, agreeing with the Berkeley students that the policies gave these administrators the ability to simply shut down people they didn't like to come to campus. A federal judge actually agreed on Wednesday with the arguments as regard to the viability of the case. She denied Berkeley's motion to dismiss, and it's going to move forward to substantive arguments at this point. So the Sessions Justice Department has been kind of picking up these campus free speech cases and joining in. And there's a quote from O'Malley. He says the Justice Department will continue to seek opportunities to defend free speech, no matter the political ideology espoused, in order to defend our nation's great traditions and the ability of citizens to engage in meaningful discourse. Now, I think this is fantastic because once they get into listening to the policies, that they never make any sense because they don't apply equally to all speakers. And the idea that someone is materially harmed by someone else coming to campus and speaking when it's in a building that you don't have to be in that day, you don't have to go, it's not anything to do with you, it's just happening on campus, is crazy pants. It's absolutely crazy pants. And so that it should be put down. And that's hey, that's what we should be doing. I am not going to talk about Angela Merkel visiting with the president today, other than to say that's happening, because Angela Merkel is a horrible leader for the nation of Germany. And I feel that pretty personally because I grew up there. So I'm not giving her any props today. Obviously, I disagree with all of her policies, and I hope the president's talking some sense into her if there's room for sense to be talked into. So there's another story out, and I keep getting this accusation from people who hear that the president is doing an executive order on welfare reform, and they're like, well, he's just trying to throw poor black people out in the street. That's racial. That is a racial statement. When you say that any welfare reform only hurts blacks, you're basically saying the only people who get welfare is black people. So stop saying that. That's first of all. And second of all, we have 26 million Americans who are able-bodied, meaning all their limbs work and they are mentally capable, but they get welfare anyway. How is that something that we want to continue to support? So this particular reform actually pertains to SNAP, which is Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. The USDA actually shows that there are 13 million people who receive SNAP benefits who don't work. So is it that you can't get anything unless you have a full-time job working at, some fancy place like Google? No, but you have to be looking for work in order to get it. That simple requirement is enough to send people over the edge. I don't get it. I don't get why anyone would be upset by that. So you got this 4.5 million people who are going to instantly go to work under reforms currently making their way through Congress. And these estimates are based on data from the Foundation for Government Accountability. We've had, when Christina Robali was with them, we've had them on. We also had them on with their latest director. Her name slips my mind, but we've had FGA representatives on the show, and they've talked about this kind of good work. This not only saves taxpayer dollars, but it helps Americans access the American dream. It's needed. So proposed work requirements would cover about 12 million people. There are approximately 7.5 million SNAP recipients who already work and receive benefits, and an additional 4.5 million who currently do not work would find themselves responsible for working, finding work, or taking advantage of federally funded education and training programs. Now, that's super important because the training programs that are available, once you take that training, remember, that goes with you. So once you're off of SNAP, you're out in the job market, the job force, you're working and you're adding skills on top of that training. So for people who discount it, if you don't have any job skills and you go get training, now you have training under your belt that you can tell a potential employer, I just completed this training program and I'm ready to work. I'm hungry. I want to make sure that I get out there and start making a life for myself. Employers love that. They want someone who is not only interested in working, but has demonstrated the ability to take it upon themselves, its initiative, to get trained. So, yeah, the initiative or the impetus for this is coming from the federal government. You can't get your SNAP benefits unless you get some training or start looking for work. But that's not the point to the employer. The employer then sees, hey, this person got the training, and that's what they need to see. You want to put everything out there in front of this potential employer to give them every reason to say yes to you. And this is one of those things that helps with that. So FGA has their own estimates. They actually place the numbers at much higher totals. They say that they're going to add 7.8 million people to the workforce with the new work requirements. And this discrepancy is due to FGA's finding that not all able-bodied individuals enrolled in SNAP and working would be subject to the new work requirements. FGA's estimate deviates from the one given to the Free Beacon by experts on the House Agriculture Committee, who pinned the final total at between 5.5 million and 6 million people. So there's a difference in the numbers that FGA and the House Ag Committee have shared. But here's what I'll say. Whether it's 5.5 million, 6 million, or FGA's number of 7.8 million, those Americans should be working. If they're going to be living off of my tax dollars and yours, they should be working unless they physically cannot work. And that's a different scenario. So I think it's good news. Finally, Congress is getting something in the pipeline. I'm hoping for more. All right, we'll be back with the second hour of Stacey on the Right on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio right after this.
Urban Family Talk is that alternative radio network because we choose to infuse Jesus in everything we do.
We count it a blessing to be able to speak with integrity and to speak honestly on the issues.
Thank you for joining us, partnering with us, being a part of
Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk, so that we can stand for the gospel.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News on the Hour,
I'm Chris Woodward. Iran continues to cause major problems in the Middle East. That's according to President Donald Trump in a joint press conference with the Chancellor of Germany.
The Iranian regime fuels violence, bloodshed, and chaos all across the Middle East. We must ensure that this murderous regime does not even get close to a nuclear weapon, and that Iran ends its proliferation of dangerous missiles and its support for terrorism. No matter where you go in the Middle East, wherever there's a problem, Iran is right there.
Next month, the president will have to decide whether the U.S. will stay in the Iran nuclear deal. The president has called the deal, among other things, horrible. Historic happenings on the Korean Peninsula after the presidents of the North and South met at the border and began peace talks. AFN's Steve Jordahl continues our coverage.
For the first time since the Korean War ground to a stalemate 65 years ago, North and South are talking, and at the highest levels, as President Kim Jong-un and Moon Jae-in met Friday at the Peace House that straddles the heavily fortified border. Pentagon analyst Colonel Robert McGinnis says it may still be too soon to start popping the champagne.
We'd all like to be optimistic that the end of the hostilities is on our doorstep, and all sorts of good things are going to happen. However, history demonstrates time and again that the Kim Jong-uns of the world don't change their stripes easily.
He says the U.S. should take its cue from President Reagan's dealing with the Soviet Union back in the day.
We have listened to the wisdom in an old Russian maxim. The maxim is, dovayai no provayai, trust but verify.
McGinnis says you have to give direct credit to President Trump for what's happening on the Korean Peninsula, at least at this point.
I think it wouldn't have happened had President Trump not put economic and military pressure on the North.
As for the end game of the talks, the U.S. hopes for a meeting between President Trump and President Kim and the denuclearization of the peninsula. McGinnis says the two Koreas have a third objective.
The primary long-term goal of North Korea is reunification. That, of course, is problematic given the great disparity in wealth between the North and the South.
I'm Steve Jordahl.
The suspect in the shooting rampage at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, was in court Friday for a hearing. Broward Circuit Judge Elizabeth Scheer set another hearing for May 25th. There, the judge will set a proposed trial date for Nicholas Cruz. He's accused of fatally shooting 14 students and 3 staff members at the school. Cruz faces 17 counts of murder. The CDC is dealing with an E. coli outbreak that has sickened dozens of people across the country. Fox's Joy Piazza reports it's believed to be from romaine lettuce from Arizona.
Scientists say E. coli can find its way onto lettuce and other farm products from birds, animals, water contamination, and humans who haven't washed their hands. E. coli produces a toxin that can seriously damage your liver. And unlike pasteurized milk or a well-done hamburger, health experts say there's no step in the production process that kills E. coli on raw produce. For more health news, go to foxnewshealth.com. House Call for Health, I'm Joy Piazza, Fox News.
And new information from the government shows the economy grew 2.3% in the first quarter of the year. The Associated Press calls it a modest number, but Dan Celia of Financial Issues considers it amazing for the January to March period.
But even more amazing than that is business sentiment, business investment. Business investment was up a bit, 12.3%. Yeah, up a bit. Holy mackerel. Spending on equipment, up 6.1%. Let me tell you, folks, and you know this, businesses don't spend this kind of money. Companies don't do that unless they feel very good about the economy and the future of the economy.
That's all our time for this hour. Find more news at onenewsnow.com. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, and the One News Now mobile app for Apple and Android devices.
Lonnie Poindexter.
Don't ever ask God for patience. Just say, oh, Lord, help me to be more patient. No, don't do that. Well, why, Lonnie? Why shouldn't I do that? He'll give it to you, but you're not going to like how you get it. Well, Lonnie, what do you mean? How do you get patience? Trials and tribulations, my brethren. That's how you get it.
Lion Chasers. Weekday mornings at 10 Central on Urban Family Talk. Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Well, James Comey never told Congress that he wasn't just leaking this information through a friend to the New York Times. This friend was a special government employee. SGE had access to the FBI. We presume he had full clearance, so he didn't disclose that. And frankly, there is no one on Capitol Hill who thinks this was the first and only time James Comey used Daniel Richmond to leak information to the press. My guess is it happened lots of times.
So have you guys, welcome back to the show. Happy Friday. Call lines are open 866-963-2037. Have you been catching this never-ending James Comey tour in which each interview exposes more to us the fact that this man, because he had been trained in classifying information and had spent, you know, the better part of his career being in charge and having people kowtow to him, that he literally believes that the truth depends on what he determines it to be. So he thinks that because he's decided that something was unclassified, that even though it was work product of the Federal Bureau of Investigations and therefore the government of the United States, that he could just disseminate it at will, that it was his purview to get a special counsel appointed. And that none of these things seem to bother this man in the least. I mean, I'm really surprised by the fact that he keeps repeating this over and over again. And he keeps telling, when people say, so doesn't that make you a leaker? No. And that question's problematic. No, it doesn't. It doesn't make me a leaker at all. He's just fine with it. He's just totally okay. Anyway, all right. What I want to go into right now at this moment, okay? So you just listened to Representative Jim Jordan. He was talking about the leaks and the fact that now Jim Comey has implicated himself in that. And now I'm going to go a little off show sheet because I have these in reverse order, but I want to listen to number 7. This is a story about people in Manhattan. So this kind of dovetails into school choice, but the story itself, in my opinion, it becomes readily apparent to you when I tell you whose voices you're going to hear, that it's tolerance for thee, but not for me. The same people who are for open borders and people coming into this country illegally have very, very different rules when it comes to their own kids. The story is about schools in a Manhattan school district. It's public school. And in the middle schools in that district, it's a very wealthy, affluent area. There are people who live in the area who are adjacent to the school district or within the boundaries who could have their kids attend certain schools. But the way they've done it is, and this happens a lot. We used to live in a district like this in tiny boutique districts or districts. A boutique district is one in which the residents pay a higher level of property tax and the schools are very highly rated. What makes it a boutique is that it's very confined. It's a smaller community and it's a smaller number of students. So this is a school district in Manhattan where the majority of the kids who go there are wealthy and white. And the way that you can kind of make that happen is people are willing to pay more for a 2-bedroom apartment in that neighborhood than they would in a neighborhood that has poor schools. Or a single family home in that neighborhood would go for 3 times one in a school district with average or poorly rated schools. In that way, if you have the money, you can afford to live in there. And you also know that people whose kids are not doing well in school are more than likely priced out of the district. It's actually really efficient and it works that way all over the country. So whether you support that model or not, that's a whole nother segment on the show or conversation. I used to be on a school board in a district like that where it was more difficult to live there because you needed to pay a premium for the housing there. Not as steep as you would in Manhattan by any stretch of the imagination, but still expensive for this area. And not a lot of rental stock. These neighborhoods usually have less rental stock, or if they do, it's similarly priced to owning a home, meaning it's very difficult to get a house in the area. So what's happening is the liberal administrators and liberal teachers and principals have all decided that the middle schools there are too white and that black students are being disadvantaged by not having the ability to attend these white, highly rated educational facilities. So what they propose, and even some of the parents have agreed to it, but not all of them, they propose that they set aside 25% of the seats in the school district to bring in students from school districts where all of the children are below grade level. So they're going to take kids from a school where the kids are below grade level and put them in not just with kids who are on grade level, but kids who are operating above grade level where the school is accelerated. And they're doing that because they want to be fair, quote unquote. So the wealthy liberals don't like that. Not only do they not like it, they're raging mad about it. So I'm going to give you where I come down on this thing. But first, I want you to listen to the setup on this. It's pretty stunning. When I was listening to it this morning, actually, I let someone in my family listen to it too. We were just sitting there. I'm sorry, I was just laughing. I'm sorry I was laughing about it, but I was. They're treating this public school like a private school, and that to me is pretty funny. So here's number 7, and you can hear them setting up how this all came to be.
An emotional meeting on the Upper West Side. Parents objecting to a proposal to require each of the 17 local middle schools to reserve a quarter of their seats for students scoring below grade level on state English and math exams. Some parents warning that high-performing students would be shut out of the most desirable schools.
Because you're talking about an 11-year-old, you worked your butt off and you didn't get that, what you needed or wanted. You're telling them you're going to go to a school that's not going to educate you in the same way you've been educated. Life sucks. Is that what the DOE wants to say?
Virtually all of the principals in the district and many of the elected parent leaders support the plan. At 2 previous meetings held elsewhere in the district, parents also generally supported the plan.
District 3 currently has very segregated middle schools. The principals have expressed concern that under the blind ranking, this may become worse. So they are looking, and parents are looking, at mechanisms we can put into place to actually decrease the segregation and increase diversity across all of our schools.
So notice the primary goal of the person who's doing this speaking is, first of all, they said elected parents. So those are school board members. They're elected to do the bidding of the people who elected them, but instead they're siding with teachers and administrators who have other goals in mind. Did she say that this would improve the educational outcome for students in the school district? No. Did she say that these kids would find a benefit out of it being in classrooms that were more diverse? No. She's not even playing that game anymore. The idea here is we need to bring in Black students because Black students are not at grade level and there's no diversity in this school, and so we need to bring them in here. Now, you would think I'm Black. Why wouldn't I think that's beneficial? Why isn't it that I am agreeing with these liberals who feel like the best thing to do with kids who are below grade level is shoehorn them into classrooms with kids who are advanced? Well, because that doesn't work. Statistical data shows that kids who are below grade level, who are just simply, you move their location, it doesn't translate to an automatic improvement in educational outcomes. Now, there are things that you can do to improve educational outcomes for kids who are below grade level, but simply moving them from one building to another, it can be the first step. But if that's all they're planning, it ain't going to work. The other thing that is unfair about this situation, and I've been on both sides of this, meaning I've wanted to see kids who are not doing well in school. I want to see programming implemented that would help them improve their educational outcomes, especially kids in socioeconomically disadvantaged areas. But I've also lived in a district where the complaint was your district is too white. And I'm sitting there like, well, we go here. It's not white at all. There are plenty of ethnic minorities in this district. Well, it's too affluent. Well, that's not something that you get to decide. So that to me is an indication that someone is just trying to make changes. So, and under the auspices of helping someone else, but it's just jealousy and covetousness. You shouldn't be able to be there in that school district and have that. So we want to put a whole bunch more kids in there just to make you mad. And we're doing it under the auspice of helping them. So what did the statistics show? The statistics show that if you want to get more than a year's worth of educational growth out of one school year, you have to have a few things present. First of all, you have to have the parents, family members have to be on board with this. The second thing is the child has to be motivated to want to accelerate their learning to catch up. And usually it's not framed as catching up. It's framed as we want to learn these things that we don't know. So the child is never under the impression that there's anything wrong with them. It's that there's some things that we want to learn, and here they are. And so let's work on learning them. And you group them together into kind of almost modules, and the child works through those. When it's presented in that fashion and the parents are on board, children are able to get more than 1 year's worth of educational growth in one calendar year. Some students were able to get 2 years worth of education in one calendar year simply because they approached it from the perspective of wanting to learn things that they didn't know, not you don't know stuff, you're not on grade level, you're doing badly, you're poor, we need to take you over to this fancy school and we need to put you in this classroom with all these other kids who are a year and a half to 2 years ahead of you educationally, and then let you sit in the back of the classrooms and realize how much you don't know. So the thing I described to you totally works. That other thing that we heard described in this clip does not work. And that is why I'm against it. So I know some nincompoop is going to listen to this segment and then email me and say, I knew you hated black people. That's why I said you were a coon. You hate black people, and that's why you say this kind of stuff. No, it's not. And I don't hate myself. I'm talking from experience here and from statistical data that shows that there are ways to help kids. So the other part that really, really bites about this proposal is that they're talking about reserving a quarter of the seats and taking some of the kids who are currently below grade level and putting them in this advanced school district. What about the other kids? What about the rest of the Black and Hispanic and minority kids who are left behind, who are below grade level? What are these do-gooders going to do for them? Now, do you see the problem? That is the issue here. The issue is that no matter how much of that primo school district they set aside for disadvantaged kids who are below grade level, it will never be enough. And then the side effect is that a lot of families will simply say, we're out of here. We paid a premium to be in this district. We'll put the house up for sale. We'll move to a district where we don't have to worry about our kid's sibling not getting into the same school that their older brother or sister is in because of this new program, coincidentally implemented by feel-good liberals that they voted in themselves. That's why it's funny. So here they are talking about how they want this program, and then they pivot over to the parents at these meetings, and the parents are mad and they're like yelling about it. And it's number 8.
Tuesday's meeting was at PS 199, one of the city's whitest schools, with many students from wealthy families, despite a desegregation plan adopted after a bitter fight 2 years ago. A middle school principal told parents many of their comments upset him.
There are kids that are tremendously disadvantaged that I would love to be able to offer, somebody mentioned $5,000 worth of tutoring for, to raise their test scores. And to compare these students and say, my already advantaged kids needs more advantage. They need to be kept away from those kids, is tremendously offensive to me.
The superintendent will now decide whether to adopt the policy, which would make the Upper West Side District the first to enact a plan to make its middle schools more diverse. Lindsay Christ, New York One.
So you got the principal of one of the schools lecturing the parents. So instead of him caring about the students that are already in his district, he's been convinced that he needs to take on the issue of students in districts that are not doing well. And so you might be wondering, well, why don't you think that that's what he should do? Like, what is the problem here? Well, the problem is, where are the principals of the districts where the kids are not at grade level? Where is the accountability there? This is one of those times where parents in this school district who don't want to see their district radically changed, because it's not about the students being Black, it's about them not being at grade level. If they're not at grade level, that means they need special instruction that the teacher has to spend time doing, that they can't then do the instruction they were doing with the kids who are on grade level or above grade level. And that's what the parents are concerned about. So wouldn't it be awesome if these parents, these ultra liberal, hardcore leftists who hate Donald Trump, they hate him so much they hate his kids and his grandkids, wouldn't it be awesome if they finally woke up to the fact that that's why so many Black parents and so many parents of kids who aren't at grade level want school choice? If they had school choice and could take their funds with their kids, they could move them to a Catholic school or a private school that's within the boundaries of their neighborhood and get their kid up to grade level, and they wouldn't be trying to basically shoehorn out kids in a district where they don't live. I just wonder if someone asked these parents that, if they could see it, or if they're still so blinded by their ideology they can't see that they made this bed and now they have to sleep in it. When we get back, we'll have more for you. We'll talk about the people fleeing California and New York because of taxes, and we'll take your calls, 866-963-2037. Stay there.
Okay, so the big question for any decision you're going to make, is this actually going to work? Well, if you've heard about MediShare, which is a brilliant way of sharing healthcare costs, you may have wondered that. Does it work? Well, so did Dr. Stuart Hoover, who initially joined to save a lot of money. The typical family saves about $500 a month. Stuart saved even more.
When we first joined MediShare, we were immediately going from a little over $1,600 a month down to $460 basically a month.
So that's wonderful, but then his wife needed emergency surgery, and the bills added up to $160,000.
So we were seeing the bills coming in, and then the bills were being paid. Portions were being shared, and the end result of this is this bill was taken care of.
Yes, MediShare works, and it's so easy to get your questions answered too, so why not? You can call right now, 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
A number of months ago, the American Journal of Political Science issued a correction to a previous study. What was their error? The journal reversed its conclusion that conservative individuals exhibited traits associated with psychotism. They admitted that the interpretation of the coding was exactly reversed. In other words, it was liberal individuals, not conservative individuals, that exhibited these traits. As one commentator put it, that's one heck of an oops. This finding made quite a splash in technical journals. For example, the publication Retraction Watch had the headline, "Conservative Political Beliefs Not Linked to Psychotic Traits as Study Claimed." It reported that researchers have fixed a number of papers that mistakenly reported that people with conservative beliefs exhibit traits associated with psychotism, such as authoritarianism and tough-mindedness. One article that appeared in The Cut tries to answer a very important question: why it took social science years to correct a simple error about psychotism. A PhD student in psychology at the University of Minnesota concluded that the authors had simply inverted the items in the survey. Although the article helps to explain how the error began, it doesn't really spend much time talking about why it took so long to discover the error. Is it possible that the erroneous findings that conservatives exhibit these traits was not discovered because it reinforced the bias most liberal researchers in psychology already have? On most college campuses, there is a prevailing view that conservatives are rigid, intolerant, and closed-minded. And there is also the view that liberals and progressives are flexible, tolerant, and open to new ideas. But if you spend any time at the major universities, you will often see just the opposite. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. Okay, so we had that discussion about the school district, and you're more than welcome to call in about it. It's I think it's sad because the people will end up basically fleeing the school district in large numbers, and then the school district will be the same as the district that it was before that, and so the cycle repeats. But we have actually a caller, Arnold, in, well, I'm not exactly sure, but Arnold, welcome to the program.
Hi, Stacy. Hey, once again, bang up program. I'm ex-Air Force. I'm an Honor Guard alumni like yourself, and I got to stay over target because you just been doing such a great job. I got to stay with this. If I go somewhere else, oh my gosh, such a great program, Stacy, and to the king.
Thank you.
I appreciate what you're doing. Just wanted to comment on the Comey thing. I agree with you. The arrogance of the man. He has at least a presidential clearance, the same kind of clearance you and I had when we worked in the Honor Guard.
Mm-hmm.
He had access to the president at any given time. But for him to have a meeting with the president of the United States and say, oh, those are my personal notes and I can classify them whatever I want, no, you don't get that option. And what's so bad about it is you got a lot of the mainstream news media supporting him in an indirect way in that same kind of conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Going, really? because they're taking advantage of the ignorance of most people, and I don't mean that in a bad way.
Yeah.
They just don't know about how classification works and that kind of thing, but you and I kind of are familiar with that. And for him to make the statements that he's making, that giving himself an excuse, oh, my gosh, it's infuriating.
It is.
Really is. As he's doing the same thing that he got Hillary Clinton off.
Yes. Okay, so you know the inner workings here, and I just want to pick your brain for a couple seconds because I've been just as stunned. Like, so last night I was listening to, I got a little clip of Sean Hannity. He was kind of breaking down what he heard, and I did see the YouTube video of the interview with Bret Baier, and so Bret Baier, he did his best to put the screws to Comey, but he's a pretty slimy individual when it comes to answering these questions directly. He'll say, well, you're asking the wrong question, and then he'll deflect, or you're actually not right about that. And then he'll say something that if you don't know what he's talking about, it sounds perfectly reasonable. And his demeanor is that of someone who is eminently qualified to comment and to tell you don't know what you're talking about. But let's talk about that clearance thing for a second. I didn't hold a TS while I was on active duty in the Air Force, but I did hold a secret, and a secret clearance, they take it just as seriously as if I just was handling regular sensitive information, which is the only level below that. And it doesn't matter if it's sensitive all the way up to, top secret Yankee White. You are responsible for maintaining the security of classified information, whether it's verbal or written or emailed or electronic, whatever. So do you buy it that he could have a meeting with the president of the United States and then write a memo about it and then keep a copy of that memo at home outside of the classified silo, like the safe storage area, and then share the unclassified, as he calls it, information from the memo with someone who admittedly does have clearance, but was instructed to share it with news media? Do you buy that?
No, I don't. I absolutely not. I do not. He has, as I said before, the reason why I say presidential clearance, because, when I was in the Honor Guard, and I was in charge of presidential colors, and because we worked either in the White House lawn when we did arrival departure ceremonies, or we had opportunity to do White House dinners, because we had direct access to the president. Access means you don't even have to look at classified material, but the fact that you have access to a person who does, then you had to have a clearance commensurate with that access. And that's why I mentioned presidential clearance. And most of the Young Guard folks that I worked with at the time, because I think I preceded you, we all had presidential clearances.
Okay, wait. I need to be clear. I wasn't on the White House Honor Guard. I was on the Eglin Air Force Base Honor Guard.
Okay.
Yeah, so I did not have the same clearance that you had, but the rules are the same. But I didn't work in the White House. Oh my goodness, I totally would have loved that. But no, I was stationed on Eglin Air Force Base, and I was a member of the Eglin Air Force Base Honor Guard. So I did not have access to the White House or anything like that. But you go on and tell us about it, because this is fascinating.
Okay, so anybody who has access to the president, you had to have at least a presidential clearance because you had access to him. Because remember, he's responsible for the nuclear codes and a bunch of other stuff. And the way the classification system works is, you can have a top secret or presidential clearance. The next thing is access. That's what determines what kind of category you're in within that level of classification. So even though I had a presidential, if I could get in close proximity to the president on a regular basis, and we did at the Presidential Honor Guard, like I said, for different functions, then that determined my level of classification. So when Comey, he's the FBI director, he has a lot more higher classifications than I do, because he has access to a lot other different programs. Even some that the president didn't have the need to know, so he didn't have access yet. But if he needed access to any program, they would have to read him in to get access to that same level of classification that he's already in. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm loving it. That's why I'm not saying anything. Keep going, because you got it right on the head. You're explaining what people don't actually know about these interviews he's doing.
Right. So once you get access, and a lot of these classified programs they're further protected by code words and stuff like this. So that gets deep. But Mr. Comey had access to the President of the United States, and first of all, he had a one-on-one meeting with the President, which you never do. You always have somebody in the office with you, because, like I said before, the President he commands the nuclear codes. There's always a guy that follows him in the military, carries a briefcase called the football.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm telling you is public knowledge. You can look it up. You can just Google it. But because the president has access to the nuclear codes, you can't be alone with the president in that sense. If you're not part of his direct White House staff, like his chief of staff, that kind of thing. You have to have at least two people with you. Now, Comey he got access to the president by himself. He had a conversation with the president, and he wrote notes down about it. That's not his notes to take home and put in an unclassified safe because it's classified information. You had conversation with the president of the United States in a private, secret meeting, if you will, and then you take notes about it and you give it to somebody who just, even though he was by extension working for the FBI, because that's what came out recently about this guy that he gave the notes to. He still doesn't have access. He's not clear for that kind of information. And when Comey gave it to this guy, he violated he committed a felony.
Yeah.
He's trying to make excuses. Well, because I'm the FBI director, I can determine what my notes are, if they're classified, secret, or confidential. Well, I'll just make them secret. No, you won't. There's a thing called Office of Administrative Deterrent and Responsibility, OADR. I think you're familiar. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, absolutely.
We had a lot in the military. What that means is, if I am the originator of the document, I can classify the document. However, he had a conversation with the president. So who's the originator of the conversation that he had with the president? It always defaults to the president. So Mr. Comey is not the OADR, if you will. He's not the originator. He had a one-on-one conversation with the president, and because the president is the chief executive, the number one administrator over the government, it defaults to him. The president gets to determine whether that communication is classified or not Mr. Comey. And he took notes and took them home. He violated that. And for guys like myself that are print now, I got other clearances in SAP programs and I manage them, that kind of thing. But it infuriates me when they take advantage of the public who don't really understand how that works, and they make a general statement or a glib remark. It's like they kind of brush it off. Oh, it's not a big thing. Oh my gosh, it is.
Two things I have to say. First off, thank you for calling the show today. You're like the first guest of the show because our guest doesn't come on until next segment. And so thank you for calling the show with this information. And second of all, thank you for your service and what you did working in the White House and doing ceremonies and working in the United States Air Force Honor Guard. I think it's fascinating. It's such a privilege. I felt privileged to do the one for Eglin Air Force Base, but you got to do the ultimate one where you actually got to be with the president and all of that. And I think it's so fantastic. And then the other thing is, if you're listening to the show, if you're watching the show, you can save this clip out from the moment that our guest came on just a few minutes ago and broke this thing down, because it's so important what you've just shared. There is no way that James Comey, even as director of the FBI, had the right to share information from his conversations with the president of the United States outside of the people who were basically held the same classification. So held the same security clearance. In other words, if they weren't secured at the level of the FBI or above, or in this case, cleared at the level of being able to communicate with the president of the United States, then they did not have the right to know what the substance of the conversations was. And so he talks about the training that he's had and the ability to classify things. And one thing I have to give Anderson Cooper some credit for is that he did say, well, but things can be retroactively reclassified afterwards by other agencies. And he said, yes, they can, but not in this case. Well, we don't actually know that because we've not had anyone who's looked at what he's done and actually given us an answer on that. That has not yet been determined whether or not those 4 memos that he took home with him should be reclassified at a higher level. That's not complete work right there. So I'll give you the last word on it. You can close it out with whatever you want to share because it's been fantastic. Thank you.
Oh, well, Stacey, it's just been my privilege and my honor to share with you, and thank you for accepting the call. Like I said, you're doing great work. Oh, my gosh. I told your screener, there's so many topics she's hitting. Oh, my gosh. On all cylinders, I got to stay on target. I got to stay with this one and not go off to some other tangent. But thank you so much, Stacey. I appreciate what you do. God bless you, and to the king.
God bless you, and to the king to you too. And have a great weekend. And thanks for calling in. Feel free to call in anytime. I love my expert listeners. I love all my listeners. I love my expert listeners too. Thanks for calling in today. Talk to you again soon. Have a good weekend. And notice when he was sharing with us just then, he's not angry. He's not outraged. He doesn't hate Jim Comey, but he's talking about the process. And for every one of the people who made the mistake, like the poor sailor who he was proud of working on a submarine, and he took 6 pictures and he served jail time, there are literally hundreds of thousands of Americans who work for the federal government and have some kind of security clearance and maintain the security of the information they have access to, no matter what form it's in. And so it's such an insult to those people, like our caller, who call in, who they go to work, they do whatever it is that they're supposed to do, like Arnold was describing in his work in the White House, working with the president and other dignitaries. And they do their job, and they don't think anything of the fact that they have access to this information because they know it has to stay with them. They have to maintain their security clearance. And so then you have, James Comey, someone who should have known better. As all moms around America say, you should have known better. He should have known better. And yet he's still out there talking about this and really duping Americans into thinking that as FBI director, you get to decide what's classified and what's not, even above and beyond the president of the United States. Because he was a private citizen, he had the right to send information out because he was no longer employed by the government. That is not how security clearances work. Anything that I viewed, however many years ago it was that I was on active duty in the Air Force, anything I viewed that was classified, even sensitive, anything I viewed that was secret, remains secret forever. I don't get to disclose it once I separate from the military. So there are things that I saw on F-16s and F-15s that were secret. There are parts of those planes that I not only saw and toured and had explained to me, but I wrote detailed reports on those parts of those aircraft. I did studies and extrapolated out the probability that those parts would break or maintain their serviceability. I did all of that, and whatever it is that I knew then, every single one of those reports, even though since I've been gone a while and I'm sure the planes have been updated, they're obsolete, the information contained therein, all of it, anything I accessed in order to create the reports, any knowledge that may still be noodling around somewhere in the recesses of my mind, remains classified at whatever level it was classified the moment I was interacting with it. Because I am a civilian now, I am not permitted to now say, well, some of that wasn't classified or some of that is no longer relevant, so now I'm going to go share it. Now I can talk about this or that. Or what was a really great story what happened when I was in a hangar one time and there were crew chiefs there and there was an F-16 there and this happened. If it happened with something that's classified, that story stays with me and the people who were there who shared the classification, and it never gets shared outside of that. Or I am violating federal law on keeping information secure. That's how that works. And so I'm not really worked up about it. Like sometimes you see me on the show, I get really ticked off about stuff and I get to, doing a little bit of ranting. I'm not doing that about this, mainly because I think all of us are getting a little punch drunk with a level of ineptitude that we're constantly forced to endure. And this is just like the cake. This is the whole cake. This guy, James Comey, has not only violated the classification by sharing and leaking information to his friend at Columbia Law, he's also put the information into a book. If he's not prosecuted for this, you might as well just forget having classified information or ever prosecuting leakers ever again. You know why? Because it's not just him. It's Hillary Clinton. And it's everybody who interacted with her on that stuff. It's Blumenthal. Remember, she was giving him access to the information that she was stripping the classifications off of and then faxing it to him on an unsecure fax machine. Blumenthal, who he couldn't get a security clearance, and so he was barred from working for the federal government. She tried to bring him in as a member of her staff, and he couldn't pass. So then she gave him the information anyway. If these people aren't prosecuted, then that means good people like our caller, good people who are on active duty now, Arnold and everybody else. Why should you work on maintaining classification if James Comey can leak stuff to the New York Times via a friend? I mean, I'm just saying, it's got to be one or the other. We can't have all of this lawlessness and then expect good, hardworking people to keep doing their work, to keep doing what they have to do to keep classifications. It's serious. They told us we'd go to jail. So, what up with that? All right, when we get back, we have Sara Gonzales. She's a reporter for The Blaze and good friend of the show, and she'll be back to talk current events with us right after these messages.
Here's what you missed on Airing the Addisons.
I remember talking to a Muslim friend of mine many, many years ago in college, and he was from Lebanon. But I remember being surprised as he was talking about the Christian that lived next door to his family. The Christian. Now, you have to reverse your brain here. You have to reverse your brain. Because he said, yeah, there's a Christian woman that lives next door to us, you know, and she's very nice, you know. And he said, but she probably won't be Christian long because our family's working on her. Isn't that interesting? Like, isn't that something? And I remember being like, but she has the truth. You know what I'm saying? Like, she has the truth. But there was this thing of like, yeah, we're just like, you know, we're just living nicely next to her. And it was sort of like how Christians do. We're just being an example, and we believe we're going to win her, he said.
Airing the Addisons, 6 to 9 Central on Urban Family Talk.
We kind of take it too lightly.
Yeah.
When we talk about people's eternities.
Hi, I'm Mark. After a few years of using drugs began to use me. I heard about Teen Challenge in a jail cell. When I got here, I found lasting freedom. This is the longest I've been sober in 29 years.
If you know an adult or teenager who's struggling with a chemical addiction, Teen Challenge can help. Call us today at 417-581-2181 or reach us online at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
Who is today's urban woman?
Today's urban woman is about empowering herself, empowering her family to empower our future. We have a wealth of opportunities here in America. There are no excuses. Everyone should be able to empower themselves, educate themselves, and be stewards of our society. Today's urban woman, here to stay, and we're moving forward, never looking backward. I'm Deneen Borelli, and I am today's urban woman.
Boycotts. They're effective, communicating to our society that something has gone terribly wrong. Here's Ed Vitagliano, Executive Vice President of the American Family Association.
Before Target changed its policy, it had men's rooms for men, women's rooms for women. And you ask the question, why? Why did Target have a policy of gender-specific bathrooms before it changed? Well, it's because everybody in every civilized country of the world understands that men and women, generally speaking, are uncomfortable with a stranger of the opposite sex when they're in the bathroom or they're changing their clothes. That's why these rooms were separate to begin with. So what's changed? People still feel the same way. That's why this policy is misguided.
Sign the Boycott Target Pledge. It's over 1 million strong. It's at afa.net.
This is Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. I want to mention again for you guys that we are having a wonderful marriage and family conference down in Tupelo, and it's going to be fantastic. Kids conference is included in the cost of your registration. They get to come in for free if they're age 4 to 12. And the price beginning May 1st is $35. That's your individual registration cost, and kids get in for free. A ministry booth rental is $50. That means you get to put up whatever your materials are for your ministry. And we're hoping that people who have specific, let's say, Bible studies for couples, women's Bible studies, books that you've written on the subject, whatever you've got going on, $50 gets you space at the event where everyone who attends will be able to be exposed to whatever it is that you're sharing, that you're trying to do on behalf of your ministry. So really good opportunity there, and we're expecting a good turnout. We already have people who've started in on the process of registering, and we're looking for more. So please remember, you're going to be able to meet every radio host, all of the ones that are local and the syndicated ones who were a part of Urban Family Talk. You're going to get to meet us there at this conference. And then there's also the possibility that there'll be some AFR hosts there too. Some of us do double duty, but I'm talking about some of the AFR hosts that are in the area. We're hoping to have a few of them swing through as well. So wonderful opportunity to meet and to get great information on marriage and family from the biblical Christian perspective. And so the Marriage and Family Conference is August 17th through 18th in Tupelo, Mississippi. And we're looking forward to seeing you there. So go over to urbanfamilytalk.com and register, and we'll be with you. You'll be with us. We'll all be there together doing this fun work. And you can see who all's going to be there as well. There's a neat little graphic up showing some of the initial speakers that we've scheduled. Okay, so we do not have our guests just now for you. And so, of course, best guests are sometimes, most often, our callers, 866-963-2037. I want to say hi to everybody on Facebook and the YouTube stream and the Periscope stream. So good to have everybody on there. Now, we have this story that I was talking about at the beginning of the show, and I haven't gotten a chance to get to it. And I'm desperate for you guys to hear this, because when you see these people coming into your states, your low tax states, you got to make sure and let them know, don't be voting for stuff that you're running away from. Stop voting for liberal policies. Yes, you want to feel good about yourself? Don't vote for that stuff. If you're running away from high taxation, why would you vote it in at the new place where you get to? Come on. So 800,000 people are about to flee New York and California because of taxes. And this is according to a couple of economists that I greatly respect, Art Laffer and Stephen Moore. They're predicting a new mass exodus of wealth from New York and California because of the tax reform package. They've written an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal headline, "So long, California, sayonara, New York." And both of these men, Mr. Laffer and Mr. Moore, have advised President Trump. They say the bill will cause a net loss to those states of 800,000 people over the next 3 years. So the tax changes limit the deduction of state and local taxes to $10,000. So many high-earning taxpayers in high-tax states will actually face a tax increase under the new tax code. Laffer and Moore say that the effective income tax rate, what people actually pay for high earners in California, is going to jump from 8.5 to 13%. Wealthy Manhattanites, people who live in New York, will face a similar increase. Those who make $10 million or more will see a potential tax hike of 50% or more, according to their analysis. So what you used to be able to do is you make, $10 million or you make $4 million a year. You could go out and buy a house for $4 million, and you could deduct all of the property tax on that house. And property tax on a house like that would be a couple $100,000 a year. You can deduct that from your taxable income. So it was a good investment. That's how you see people getting into these big mansions and things when they're earning that kind of money. It's not that they're necessarily happier in those huge mansions, but it represents a tax break. Do you see what I'm saying? So if you're not able to take that deduction, then you're probably going to want to move into a house that's not as expensive. Well, you're still going to have a problem, because anything in New York, you're going to pay more than $10,000 a year in property taxes. So, unintended consequence, you're going to see these liberals dive bombing out of these states. In years to come, and here's the quote, they're saying that in years to come, millions of people, thousands of businesses, and tens of billions of dollars of net income will flee high tax blue states for low tax red states. They say 800,000 people will move from California and New York. Connecticut and New Jersey and Minnesota will lose a combined 500,000 people over the same period. Christabel Young of Stanford, who's an economist, says that, and he co-authored the leading study on wealth and tax migration, calls the forecast pure nonsense. All right, dueling economists here. He said that California, New York, and New Jersey have been high tax states for decades and still have the highest per capita concentration of rich people in the country. Okay. There's no correlation between the top state tax rate and the number or rate of millionaires in a state. He says that the people most affected by tax rates are the late career working rich. They're less likely to move because they are embedded in place for a host of social and economic reasons, from the location of their companies and jobs to their social lives, charitable boards, and customers. Moore and Laffer say that 3.5 million Americans on net have moved from the highest tax states to the lowest tax ones. They add that high earners are the ones who have cost the state the most by leaving, yet they fail to mention that very few of the 3.5 million were high earners. What's more, the number of millionaires in these high tax states is actually growing and not shrinking. So, they go into some more details about the arguing back and forth and how many different people. I've told you guys the definitive book on this. If you want to understand the migratory patterns of people following the lower tax rates, the book is called How Money Walks, and it's by Travis Brown, and it's a fantastic book. And I have a copy of it that I actually got from Travis Brown. I happen to know him. He lives, well, I don't think they live here anymore. I'm not sure where they live, but I've had lunch with him and met with him a few times and actually had this book given to me by him. And I read it. It's an easy read because it's very, very straightforward. In the book, he talks about how families, sometimes they'll look at their economic situation and they'll say, you know what? We want to start saving for the kids for college, or we need to find $9,000 or $10,000 a year in our budget. That's what they'll say. And then they look and they'll say, oh, well, we're paying, $12,000 a year in tax to our state. Add up the different levels of taxation that you owe the state. And they'll say, we're paying that. And then they'll look at somewhere like Nashville, somewhere in Tennessee. And they'll say, oh, if we move to Nashville, we automatically save the state tax. We don't have to pay that because they don't have state tax. Okay, so that's out of the way. Is the cost of living similar? Well, between Nashville and here, it is. For Missouri, is there the ability for us to get a home in a good school district? Yada, yada, yada. So they make the calculations, and families actually move. And so this is not a phenomenon for, like, we're not talking about 1,000 people or 500 people. We're talking about tens of thousands of Americans who move from one locale to another so that they can experience tax savings. And it's even more prevalent now because before, as the article said, people had to stay in an area because that's where their job was. Nowadays, with the advent of telework, you can literally live anywhere and still work for your company. And so they have an office there for you. Sometimes it's a small office, sometimes it's a bigger one, or they allow you to work from home and you only have to attend meetings virtually. And sometimes once or twice a year, you have to go to the home office and do meetings there. So when you look at that and when you think through what's being said here, it's not just wealthy people who are moving. It's anyone who wants to, in the balance of things, keep more of their income. So I see this in a couple of different ways. Like, part of me is really bent on the fact that it's states' rights and federalism that enable us to do this. You don't have the government telling all states that they have to charge a certain amount of tax. But on the other hand, the unintended consequence of having 800,000 people from liberal states moving into different areas is that they will make those states more liberal with their ridiculous, ill thought out ideas. The reason their states are liberal and have high taxes is because that's what they voted for. You don't get high taxation in a state and lots of liberal policies by accident. It's liberals in those states who vote for those things. And then when they have to experience the fruit of what they voted for, they then pick up and move. So my hope is that people will say, oh, wait a minute. We've been down this road before. We've seen this happen before. When we lived in our old place, we had high taxes. So we're not going to vote for high taxes. I don't care how many libraries you want to build or you want to expand the zoo. Do a fundraising campaign, but don't expect us to give you that money on our taxes, because if we do, we'll end up like we were at our last place. Hopefully people can understand that, but it doesn't mean that that's the truth. It doesn't mean that's what's going to happen. So we do not yet, I'm looking on my phone here. We don't have our guests back. Apparently we have the correct number, but it's busy, so we're not able to get her. So we'll see what happened with that. But we have the last few minutes of the show. I want to give you guys a preview for next week. So next week is the NRA convention. And it's in Dallas this year, and I'm going to be there for, I believe it's Friday. Friday's show will be coming from there. Then we have Carmine Sabia Jr. He's a Christian conservative political pundit. He's going to be coming on Monday. And then on, let me go back to that. And then on Tuesday, we have Taylor Griffin, editor of Roughly Explained, and former spokesperson for the White House and the Treasury Department under the George W. Bush administration. Sweet. Wednesday, we're going to be speaking to Jeremy Cerrone. He's the co-founder and CEO of Elite Safe. That's awesome. Elite Safe. We love that place. Awesome. And then we have Dr. Jerome Segal, Senate candidate from Maryland, senior research scholar at the Center for International and Strategic Studies. He's going to be coming on Thursday. And then on Friday, I'm going to be coming from the NRA convention, and I'm so excited about that. First of all, just can you even? That's what I love to say. Can you even? I'm hoping to catch a whole lot of really cool people there to interview and to bring to you here on the program. And there's going to be a lot of fun as well. Lots of fun images on Instagram and at the blog over at Stacy on the Right. And so you'll have to keep your eyeballs peeled for that. And then I'll be giving you an update on the blueprint. And so first off, if you don't know what I'm talking about when I say National Center, you need only go to nationalcenter.org. It's the National Center for Public Policy Research. And they have my appearance last night from CNN. It's up there. They've got it posted already. And we've also got a letter that we sent over to we sent 2 letters from Horace Cooper, who's one of the co-chairs of Project 21. And we sent those letters over to the Civil Rights Division, the Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division. He's the acting assistant attorney general, John M. Gore, at the U.S. Department of Justice, and acting chairman Victoria Lipnick of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. We sent a letter over to the 2 of them asking them to investigate if workplace practices focusing on implicit and unconscious bias violate Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So the provision of the Civil Rights Act prohibits discrimination based on sex, race, color, national origin, or religion. And we're talking about the implicit bias training. And why are we talking about it? Because Starbucks plans to shutter their doors and give implicit bias training to 8,000 of their employees. Now, the reason we have a problem with it is because basically what it's teaching people is to go back against what they had originally been taught, which is that you don't pay attention to someone's ethnic background, you pay attention to their behaviors. And what implicit bias training does is it says, when you see a Black person, here's some things you can't do. It makes us more suspicious of each other. It makes us less trusting of each other. And it goes against the original protections that we have enshrined into law to protect people from discrimination. And it's all based on a fallacy anyway, because the guys in the Starbucks were asked to purchase something, and when they said no, they could have purchased a scone. They even have candy up there for 99 cents. They could have spent 99 cents, and they would have been allowed to stay there as long as they wanted. They said no. The police gave them the opportunity to leave, and they said no. They wouldn't buy anything, and they would not leave. So now Starbucks is going to lose $16 million over the course of that business day, training their employees that every time they see a Black person, they have to treat them a certain way. You know, it's hard enough being Black or fat or tall or short or white or Asian or anything else without having a whole bunch of misconceptions and poorly thought out ideas foisted upon every person that you encounter. You know, we are supposed to be looking at each other as people. Hey, there's a person I can serve. How can I serve you today? What would you like to have at Starbucks? Anybody who's there who doesn't want to buy anything, like, why do you think you can be there? It's not a right. It's a private business. All right. That's the week. Have a great weekend. God bless. And we'll see you back here on Monday with more Stacy on the Right.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of Urban Family Talk, Urban Family Communications, or American Family Association.
Urban Family Talk. Urban Family Talk.
You only want to donate to biblically sound organizations. So as a federal or state employee, why not choose the American Family Association Combined Federal Campaign Designation 12037? Of the organizations on the CFC list, AFA is one of the few standing for you and your family. By choosing 1, 2,